right, here we are, another executive interview for Becoming Retail, our look inside the hearts and minds of retail executives. And today I'm joined by a good friend, Dana Schwartz, who is the Vice President of Direct-to-Consumer and Digital for Keen. And like normally, we want to really get her thoughts on leadership principles, and really how she's navigating this interesting, fun, exciting, and sometimes crazy world of retail. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you, Rob. It's so great to be here today. It's definitely a wild and crazy time that I have to say I am enjoying as it pertains to retail.
So. It sounds like, and I love, and we'll really look forward to hearing your perspectives on that. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get started in retail? Why don't you share a little bit of your journey with us?
Sure. The story it kind of warms me thinking about it when I was getting ready for this conversation. And I must have always known I was going to do something in retail. But where my journey started was, I'm going to take myself back to high school right now. And so I was a junior in high school, and I had an opportunity to work at a local menswear shop. And it was like the place in town. It was Marty's Formal Wear. And I had no knowledge at all about formal wear. Apparel, I thought I had good taste, right? I was like, okay, I have good taste. Maybe this can apply. And I didn't want them to know, obviously, that I didn't know anything. So went in, interviewed, and they said, you've got 1 week to ramp up before the prom. And so I had to study how to measure, what to do, service levels. I did, of course, typical Dana style. I did a deep dive into researching the history of men's apparel. And I was ready in a week, and I went in really confident. And confidence is a theme I'll talk about today. Inside, was I really confident? I didn't know what I was doing, but I at least took the tools and I tried to apply myself to that. And what was awesome about that experience, and I had no idea so early on, but it kind of shaped me. I loved not knowing, having to create my own destiny. I decided that I was going to have a maniacal focus on each customer, right? And understand coming into Rent a Tuxedo is about an experience ultimately. And there's always a story that goes along with that, whether it's prom or a marriage. And so what I decided to do, I was like, you know what, I'm going to win. And I'm not only going to sell, but I also want to understand how the experience was in the end. And I can relate that to probably something that I focus a lot on in my job today, is focusing not just on getting the sale, but building the relationship and the post-transaction. And from that experience, it taught me, I listened to every word of the stories. And then I started, it was so early on, but I was like, I want to share more of the stories. So we literally wrote the stories down and shared them out, not on social media, but in our own way. And it was kind of awesome. And I think the other lesson I learned was efficiency. We were doing things the guy who owned the place was probably more old world traditional, and he was using index cards. And I came in and I'm like, there's got to be a better way. So I'm like, I'm going to build a database, and I'm going to try to have the data easy so we can find the customers instead of going and using paper. So I had no idea that was really the start of me becoming a retailer and then moving into digital. So kind of cool.
Totally cool. Doesn't surprise me at all that you jumped right in, did the research, and went at it with all the passion you did. And the point around building the relationship, I mean, gosh, who knew back then what that would mean to what you're driving today? And it's, I was laughing inside on the efficiency front. Many people know, worked at my father's distribution centers growing up, and I would go around, and it wasn't anything that I probably did meaningfully or really knew I was doing it, but always pointed out ways to be more efficient. Of course, I'm sure people weren't so happy that I was doing it, but it just was inherent in what I was doing. And so that's great. I really appreciate you sharing the story. So going back to your, humble beginnings at Marty's through where you are today, I've witnessed firsthand you bringing many brands and retailers online, really bringing them to the digital age. And you had to, in many cases, transform them into a digital company. So I want to ask what could be a basic question or this big ethereal question around digital transformation. It's two words that's used a lot, and even more so over the last 8 months, given the crisis we're all going through. So what's your definition of digital transformation?
So I'll start with a little backstory to get into the head of Dana, and then also a lot of my experience that I've had. When I choose a brand, I choose a brand that I can relate to. And what I get really excited about, there's like two things that excite me, and they're both appealing for different reasons, but in the same way. So I can walk into a brand and have a just whiteboard with nothing on it, and that may really scare somebody. And you have to figure out where to start, how to build it from scratch. And I've done that. When I was at Ethan Allen, we built out their first digital e-commerce experience, and that was scary a little bit, right? But I liked it. I loved the unknown. And then I also realized I love the idea of going into something that has a lot on the board and is very complex and is filled with challenges and opportunities. So, with that type of scenario, you have to be a good problem solver, which a lot of times when people ask what I do in retail and digital transformation, I said, at the end of the day, I'm a problem solver. So, my definition of digital transformation is kind of like a couple of words, but it's being fearless and fail forward fast, because you have to be fearless. You want to hesitate and pause when you feel necessary, but to transform truly in a digital fashion and even in retail, you really have to be fail forward fast and looking ahead and not being afraid. To along that journey, you can make mistakes, you find wins, and at the cornerstone of all of that, Rob, like, you learn a lot about yourself as a leader and as a retailer in digital transformation. It's also about being confident. And confidence is something that I mentioned about, in my first retail experience. It stays with me today, because even in the time of COVID that we're in, I go back to the role I'm in now, going back to my last role, there were times where there were many unknowns and I was taking risks. I know that I'm a risk taker because you have to be. And there are definitely moments where you're sitting there in that chair and you are leading a huge organization, multi-million-dollar business with aggressive goals. And at the end of the day, serving a fan. And inside you're like, okay, this really needs to work. And you have to be calm and confident during that. So in order to kind of pull that off, fearless is at the core of all that I do with digital transformation.
Well, I got to tell you, Dana, I appreciate you answered it really from the heart and the person. You often hear, and it's not a big surprise, and they're probably not wrong when you talk digital transformation, it goes right to technology. But you talk about, just as this Becoming Retail series is all about, the people, the person, and how you're fearless, which I love, and confident at the same time, and not being afraid to fail. So I guess let's pivot a little bit to how you measure success. So it's great if you're fearless. It's great if you're confident. It's great that you can handle a situation where it's a blank slate, but also complex. But at the end of the day, you have to have some, stakes in the ground in terms of what defines success. So the way we went about this with Becoming Retail, we looked at three key measures: customer, financial measures, and innovation measures. So how do you think about and view success through each or all of those lenses?
Yeah, it's interesting, Rob. All three of those are really relevant to me. But if I had to pick one, it's probably a toss-up for me between innovation and customer. Because at the end of the day, like, I feel that with my experience, you ultimately need tools and strong technologies to bring you there. I mean, that's how we first met, right? On originally Demandware, right? And now Salesforce. And I look back and I'm like, wow, I was always looking ahead to innovate. And with innovation brings constant change, because customers are changing every single day. Life is changing every single day. So innovation is what is at the cornerstone of how we move forward and how we bring brands forward, how we bring fans forward, even in using new technologies. But if I kind of circle back a little bit, I go back to the customer. Being fan first is really, really important. And how I'm, accustomed to measuring success number one, you've got to make your numbers. I say that with a big smile because like you can be in any boardroom and meeting and be like, yes, we're going to do this marketing activation. And we've got this new SMS strategy or social strategy, social selling, right? All those words are so exciting and phrases are exciting. But at the end of the day, you've got to prove the model and you've got to make the numbers. So I am incredibly numbers centric when it comes to making my commercial goals. I'm very competitive in that way. I don't want to, it comes from like not wanting to let down, right? But when I look at the true measurements that we're really using today, and specifically myself and my team in my current role, lifetime value is really critical for our success. And when we look at that, that shows that we're winning in the relationship. We're not just a one-off transaction. We're actually committed to building a two-way relationship with the fan. We even go as deep as looking at CSAT, which is our customer satisfaction ratings and reviews. We have a team called our Delight team, and that Delight team is charged with looking at just those things. So when we know that we're winning with the fans, we know that we're winning in total. So that's really our measurement and our barometer, because a lot of times I've been in situations, newly joining brands where the metrics are so operational and they're inward based and efficiency based, and they're not about looking outward, specifically at the fans. Lately, I would say net new customer is enormous. It's a huge focus of ours. And that then changes the entire journey of how you are bringing that fan into your brand world, because they are net new to you. So it's another whole opportunity. And I don't think I've ever focused more on new customers than the current times.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, I guess, that you say customer and innovation. On the innovation front, I often am reminded of the conversation we had at one of the digital council meetings about TikTok. And I don't know if you remember, we were geeking out about it. It was before before it was a household name. And what I loved about your leadership was that you didn't just sit back and accept it, but you subscribed. You dug right in. And again, connecting the dots with the Marty's experience, you really wanted to understand what it was all about and be a fan, be a customer, be a consumer of that medium so that you better understand it. Exactly. So I guess, when I think about customer, you talked about lifetime value. Another aspect, though, I'd be interested, you brought up the Delight team. I hadn't heard that before. Maybe talk a little bit about what that team looks like and what they measure.
Yeah, it's really kind of cool. And I have to say, this Delight team is a product of the time that we're in right now. So I feel like during this journey of being in a pandemic, and I know we'll talk a little bit about that later on, you go from pivot, right, to triage, to then wow, there's all this new opportunity. And by the way, our wait time is 10 times longer than it should be, right? We're not responding to emails. We're blowing up and we're letting the fan down. So what we decided to do is we kind of did a couple of interesting things. And we had a current business team, a plan ahead team, not with a big group. And then we said, okay, we need a Delight team. And this team is focused purely on how do we delight the fan in the best way possible. Some of the outcomes of that and how we're measuring are, we are now serving fans 7 days a week. That never would have happened before. So we looked at our industry and we were like, wow, there are only a handful of brands that are really doing 7 days a week, phone, email, and chat. Do we really need to? And we're like, well, we want to be the best. And of course, I'm all over that. And I'm a part of, I'm a working group member and I'm a steering group lead on the Delight team. So if we can win at commerce any day, right? We've got the best tools out there, but if we're not winning at service, we're not winning at all. So that's why the Delight team was created. And what we're using really largely, and we just rolled it out globally. So, and it's only probably a few months old right now. And we're now measuring, we have a dashboard daily flash report for our region, Europe, and we're looking at CSAT. I mentioned that earlier. And I think in the past, I would have been like, that's a call center metric, might not have cared about it really as much, or we're not quite there with NPS, to be quite honest, but we want to get there. And now we have this focus on looking at customer satisfaction in a whole new way. And we've learned that during this journey, especially during pandemic, fans actually want to talk to us longer. And we've embraced that. We're like, that's actually not a bad thing. We're learning more about our fans and we're there for them in a time that's needed. So it's really been that experience. So now we are going from kind of servicing them better. We're there for them when they need us. So again, meeting the fan where they are, which ties to commerce, right? And we want to be sure that we're expanding the way that we're reaching out to them. We are also working on how we leverage the data to have in our call center information. So it's recognized when Rob Garv calls in and he happens to be a longtime Keen customer with, lots of shoes on feet in the family, we recognize that. So it's taking also the one customer view and really trying to leverage that to delight. And we're adopting very soon the idea of delight bundling, where we empower our teams. We give them a set of tools, whether it's a handwritten note or it's just a different tactic that they want to leverage. We will then give them the tools and they can be empowered to decide which fans and how they'd like to delight their fans. So it's about showing something a little bit more special and extraordinary when we recognize that fans need it more than ever. And they're also new to e-commerce. We've had almost 70%, sometimes 80% new fans into our brand these days.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's amazing. It's really high. So talk about the pressure on you. Better be delighting, right? Like if you just do the status quo, it is not going to work. So that's why the delight piece is really interesting. And it's something I look forward to sharing more in the industry about how that turns out.
Yeah. Well, our research shows that the digital transformation investments are as much in the people in the organization as it is the technology. And I love the example of this delight team because it really operationalizes a lot of what we're talking about. Otherwise, this whole service metric of time of call, you're totally reversing it, where it might be okay, right, in this case, to actually embrace these new customers, spend time educating them on the brand, and then giving the data. I picked up on that piece to the agents to help them, empower them as well to provide more personalized service.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, we can talk about metrics clearly all day long. I wanted to hit up the innovation piece, but I'm gonna move us along a little bit and talk about leadership principles. And as you know, through our research, we identified 6 principles that retail leaders are really leaning into. And I think about you and really observe what you've been able to accomplish over the years. You can embody several of them, from embracing technology to leveraging the ecosystem, inspiring agility. But one I really want to hone in on, Dana, is the embodied purpose, because I know that is so important to you, but also Keen, and what you were able to do as an organization during the heat of the pandemic around donating, what was it, 100,000 pairs of shoes?
100,000 pairs, $10 million in shoes.
Wow.
A decision over a weekend.
Oh, is that right? Oh my God.
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, we made the decision on a Friday afternoon, and Sunday at 3 made the final call, and we built the experience within a day and a half.
Wow. So talk us through a little bit about how the company enables that to happen. Make a decision really quickly, know that it's the right thing to do, and talk a little bit about how your personal passion for purpose aligns with the company passion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When we started our conversation today, and I might have mentioned it in other past conversations that we've had, I have to live and breathe a brand to really work for it. And the values are very, very important. And Keen is the 3rd family-owned independent brand that I've been able to work for. And Keen doesn't call itself a brand. We call ourselves a movement. And when you think about the idea of a movement versus a brand, you have a higher responsibility as a steward to do the right thing. So we live and breathe that in all that we do at Keen, of making sure that we're doing the right thing. And that attracted me to the company, frankly. I mean, I have been so lucky. I've worked for Ethan Allen, which is publicly traded. I've worked for Echo Footwear, family brand, independently owned, sitting around the table, days talking with the founder and the owner and talking shoes and life and family, and down to Village Candle, who's now owned by Stonewall Kitchen. I worked for the founder there, and I get to work for the founder here at Keen. And that whole mentality of leading with values and being purposeful is what moved me across the country. I'm born and raised New Yorker, and I now live in Portland, Oregon, to work for Keen. And Keen is interesting, and I'll speak a bit from the heart because that's truly how we operate. Keen defines itself as a love brand. So when we do something, we try to position it from love and peace. And even in this time of what's going on in the country, our entire store is, our garage is actually what we call them. All the windows got boarded up a while ago with riots, and we put Vote Love out there, with a collab that we're doing with Jerry Garcia. And we take that position, and it's really powerful. And we choose to be a platform in that we're making sure we're doing good and we're doing things right. So being a love brand, that sounds like kumbaya, right? But from that, we are able to, we're kind of lucky right now because we serve what we call outside peoples. And our goal is to bring outside peoples together, whether they're, young kids, their families of all shapes, styles, sizes, ethnicities. Our job is to bring them product that they can live their lives with no ceiling and live outside. So when you work at Keen, it's almost not a job, it's a lifestyle. And I can truly say that that is important, especially when you are sitting in the shoes that we sit in, like many of my peers in the industry. With digital, you're living and breathing it all the time, right? In retail, it's definitely, not an industry if you don't like surprises and every day being a little bit different. So you really, truly have to embrace that. So we take purpose in all that we do. And when the pandemic hit, we decided, we were like, great, we know that we have a stable platform. We're using one of the best commerce tools, obviously happens to be Salesforce, and we're going to turn that into a giving platform overnight. And we're going to give away 100,000 pairs of shoes. We don't know how exactly we're doing this yet. And we could have done it a couple different ways. It would have been easier, and I reflect back to what I started with, I like a challenge. It could have been easier to say, okay, we're going to take those, we're going to donate them to one organization, and we're going to make a decision. We'll truck them out from our FEC and it will be all great. And by the way, FEC stands for Fan Engagement Center. Everything that we do is about centering on the fan. So that's super critical for us. Or we can do something a little bit different that is a little bit harder. And so we decided to make it a pay it forward effort where we would allow our fans to nominate whomever fan that they wanted that they felt was in need. So we decided to make it a nomination program, and we custom built that again in almost one day with testing 100% 24/7. We went 24/7 for almost 3 weeks straight, which was so exciting to be able to bring that. So again, we put it in the fans' hands to make their decision, and then we delivered upon what was their wish. So again, everything that we do is truly with purpose, and that hits with my values. It makes it easier to do my job because I feel like we're doing something good. And we're combining that with retail and using retail as a platform for that.
You're using your platform for change. And what I'm hearing from what you said, Dana, it's you can't just wake up one morning and say, we're going to donate 100,000 shoes and make it work. It just, this movement you talk about, the brand in Keen, it just is pervasive purpose. And again, it's not something you just pretend or turn on one day, but you were able to move so quickly, it sounds like, and get everybody behind it because this was such core to your values. I love it. So, exactly. So inspiring. So I want to take a slightly different angle to purpose. And you might recall when we first talked becoming retail, one of your first reactions was, I really want to help the next generation of digital leaders and pay this idea of retail and this passion you have for retail forward, which, by the way, some commentary, like we love that you totally right away instinctively got what one of the main objectives of us doing this was. Can you talk about why that's so important? Why did you react the way you did?
When you approached me with it, obviously I was like, I remember that day, I'm like, I've got a lot going on. I'm like, but this is really meaningful to me. And I feel like we are in this generation of stewards right now with retail and e-commerce. And something that's been so important to me, and I would say if I picked up the phone or Zoom or anything right now and contacted almost every one of our peers, especially in our digital group, Rob, we share. And we're all about sharing best practices. We don't care about the competitiveness at all. There's like a layer that goes away, and we're fully transparent and we're fully raw and we're open to sharing. It's kind of that like scrappiness inside where you're like excited to share something and you don't think twice about it. So the next generation of retail, what gets me really excited is that, and this is something that has come to me recently, and it's almost like they're going to go in the reverse order now, because we were a part of really laying down. I mean, it was like e-commerce, like the web, and then it was e-commerce, and then it was one customer view, omni-channel, mobile focus, and headless, right? So we've gone through all these things with little threads of TikTok and all these things that, like, you're exactly right. I immerse myself as best as possible into all of these experiences. Then we have had this pandemic hit, right? So all that we did, it was like, okay, there's still these are like big brands doing these things and some small brands, but not like the mom and pop shops and these smaller brands. So during this time, they've had to catch up, where leaders have exhibited, and a lot of it pro bono, to help, right? To say, hey, we're going to get you an online shop going. We're going to help you. And this next generation of retail leaders and e-commerce leaders, they're going to take, I mean, we're still going to be a part of it for a while, right? But it's going to be about taking retail and redefining it. And almost like, how do you take digital and bring physical back in? Because people are going to crave that. You crave an engagement with a brand. And I think that next generation has even a more exciting opportunity to be a part of redefining retail and bringing it to that next level where it's kind of reverse and going back. And I love mentoring during all of this and sharing for that next generation. I think it's super exciting for them.
By the way, I'm going to borrow that term steward or stewardship. I love it. And, as you talked about, if we could play a small or large part in being that steward, being that mentor as the next generation, and us, you're right, we're not going anywhere anytime soon, redefines the industry, that would be really fun to look back on. So let's talk a little bit more about retail broadly and this next generation. So what would you tell somebody you would be talking to or mentoring who wants to get started in retail, who might not have the benefit of working at a Marty's? Like, what is it in it for them? How can they impact the world around them? What would you tell them?
I would tell them, and there've been, interestingly, a couple of college students recently that have reached out to me, even on LinkedIn. I love what's happening right now. There's like no barrier. It's like, hey, I see what you're doing and I want to get into retail. Like, can I talk to you? And I've actually been doing that, when I can find the time, because I'm like, that's kind of cool that they're just feeling comfortable and confident, right? To take that step to reach out. So what I would tell them is to not pause, to get involved, because it was the best decision that I ever made. I have been doing this now my entire career in some way, shape, or form. And a lot of times, like, friends and family that are in more traditional industries like teaching, and they're like, what are you doing all the time? You're on Zoom like 24/7. And I'm not saving the world, but I'm thoroughly enjoying all that we're doing. So I would tell them to definitely not pause, to get going on it. And what I'd also recommend is to immerse themselves into the experiences, because unless you're in it, and let's say that individual is only a digital shopper, I would probably force them to say, you can scratch out all of digital for now. You need to be a physical brick and mortar, even in today's day and time, shopper for the next 60 days. Challenge yourself. Because I think back to like when I was challenged in one of my first retail e-commerce jobs, I got in and I'm like, okay, I want to get going on like building things out and gathering requirements and talking to the key stakeholders. They're like, go work in the store. Okay. Go sit in the call center and like immerse yourself into the real stuff. So that's what I would say. Whatever you are comfortable in, and it pertains to retail, put yourself in an uncomfortable position and give yourself that challenge to live and breathe it, not just dabble, but to understand it, because you're going to be far better. I mean, if I think of just the physical and digital experiences today and the excitement of what retail will be, I've been using this kind of example for Keen because we're working on our long range plans for 3 years right now. Like they're kind of like getting locked, and that's scary because nobody has a crystal ball. But the idea of like food truck retail is kind of like, it's been my recent lingo of like, imagine like food truck, very flexible retail on the ground where you're servicing and it's gritty and it's authentic and approachable and it's different, right? And it's mobile, but it's got a digital background. So we know where to be, when to be, and what to sell. So I don't know. It's just all kinds of cool stuff. So that's what I would tell somebody looking to get into retail today.
Yeah, they should immerse themselves. And I agree, by the way, thinking about my career, just spending time in the call center and taking calls myself. I still today, when imagining capabilities or thinking about best practices or making decisions, I think back on that time and it really influenced me. And yeah, it's really interesting on the food truck piece. It is a whole new supply chain. And I think about too, their point of sale, right? They didn't spend a year putting a point of sale into a food truck. They just turned on some cloud-based platform and they were ready to sell in a minute, right? And that's the new kind of democratization of retail that we should all be experiencing.
It really is. And it's like serving something up that's unexpected. Like we're toying with the idea right now of like, and we'll do it because we're not going to pause. Again, we typically move of like fit vans at trails, right? More people are outside than ever before. And there are new people outside that have never been out there. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to camp, how to pitch a tent. And we're like, let's just put vans out there and like put our fit specialists on the ground and service them in different ways. So we're going to bring that to life. It's an idea. Like ideation has to be sometimes like shorter as well to get to market faster.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this concept of shopping at the edge, really bringing commerce to where the consumers are, and that's where your consumers are hanging out, right? And whether they're your existing customer or new customer, why not? They're getting inspired right there because their feet are hurting or they need some more support or whatever the case may be. Why not be where they are? Hey, so I have one final question, but before I get to that one, I want to tee up actually our favorite question. And we've been doing this with everybody we're talking to, which is if you think about retail, what's one word that you'd use to describe the industry? And just one word.
Yeah, it's an easy one for me. It's dynamic.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it doesn't feel like the most original word exactly, but for me, dynamic is all about change and being ahead and always being on. And that's what I think of. Like, it's funny, I was thinking about this before and I'm like, it's probably like a really cool original word I can come up with, but it's about being dynamic and being just always on and making sure that you're ever changing.
Yeah, well, there are so many levels to that. So the last question I have, and you've sprinkled this in through the conversation, which is perfect because it's within the context of, hey, we're living through a pandemic right now, and it's hard not to have a conversation like this, Dana, without bringing up the reality that we're living through. So I guess, what has the pandemic taught you about the retail industry? And then I guess bringing it home a little bit, what has it taught about yourself? What have you learned about yourself going through this?
Yeah, I'll first start with the retail industry. It's taught me that retail is really limitless. I feel like the pivot is probably the most overused word, right, that we've all been using. But taking something one day to having a store locator to then like making sure you can incorporate curbside pickup and delivery and messaging. And so it's really been about being limitless there and making sure that, from a retail standpoint, it's not been just about the numbers. It's really transformed, I think, a lot of the ways I know we've been thinking and a lot of my peers in the industry and conversations we've had. It's so much more about really understanding the times and how you can be sensitive and more relevant. So personalization and relevancy is bigger than ever before. So that's from a retail standpoint. We've been lucky because we've not had a lot of supply chain challenges. So we've been able to be there with product to meet the fan. And we've also used it. And another thing I will say, this is a part of sharing in retail, because we're all in it together in this world right now. And in retail, I've seen more best practice sharing than ever before to really help, like even in our own like four walls. Like I've spent more time with our different wholesale accounts, like helping. We've done best practice sessions with businesses that have never been digital. So it's truly been, that level of sharing and making sure that we keep retail alive. So I think that's one part of it. From a personal standpoint, I am definitely a leader. I am very, I'm a humble leader. And, I've never, been a major title person or anything like that. I lead with objectiveness and I lead with humility. This has taught me more than any other time in my career to even lead more with that, because you can, we've had so many aggressive goals, and you can be like so burnt out if you wanted to be. And leading with humility right now, and making sure that the teams, like you almost go through this entire time where you're like so charged up and so excited, and then you're like, wow, I haven't even taken a moment to stop. So making sure that you're really balanced and sensitive to everybody's life and boundaries, because right now it's a little bit boundaryless. I live in an apartment in downtown Portland. And so my work living space is in one, and that phone can ring or Zoom pop up at like 10 o'clock at night. We start at 6 a.m. We do a leadership team roll call. So I'm like, okay, Dana, like, you're saying this to your teams, but you need to actually set an example. So I think the biggest learning is setting the right example for your teams as well. You've kind of got to walk in the shoes to allow them to think about maybe taking a break during this time.
Yeah, setting example, being a model, and going back to the industry, really leveraging the ecosystem, which you do extremely well all the time, but certainly it sounds like stepping up during this time when we're all in need and could all learn from our peers. So Dana, heartfelt thank you. Really such an inspirational discussion, really both from a broad strategic perspective, but just the practical and pragmatic examples you gave really will help us understand really not only your leadership style, but how to think about digital transformation moving forward. And, more than anything, thank you for being a steward. Thank you for being willing to pay it forward to not only us here now, but the next generation. So thanks for sharing your journey to becoming retail.
Thank you, Rob, for including me. I feel, I'll use the word privileged, which I definitely feel that from a heartfelt way, and, being someone who believes in innovating in all that we do. So I feel lucky to be a part of this conversation today, and also for tomorrow and how we go forward.
Thank you.